Everything comes from somewhere, even cartoons. It's common knowledge that our favorite shows don't just happen overnight. A team of talented people come together to develop ideas, characters, story plots, and more to make these pieces of entertainment what they are. Cartoons in particular go through a lot of changes during their development, given how much work must go into them before production can even begin. You have to design the setting, the characters, you need to make a show bible with episode ideas and rules, and of course, in the end, you need to make the pilot episode. A pilot is an episode of a TV show that's made as sort of a test, to see what works and what doesn't, along with giving the network or producers a good idea of what the final show will be like if put into full production. A pilot is a creator or team's chance to prove that their show, their idea has potential to become the next big thing. A pilot is a great way to introduce a show's characters, the setting they live in, and what could happen in a general episode. These pilots are often created months to years before production on the final show's first season begins, and because of this, they often feature very interesting differences compared to the final show, be it art style, characters, settings, or even little things like different actors. For example, while not a cartoon, 2 years before the show premiered in 2004, a pilot episode of Drake and Josh was shot and produced back in 2002. The majority of the cast were all the same, except for the dad, who was played by a different actor. We unfortunately don't have access to the full Drake and Josh pilot, as it's currently lost media, and is one of the many TV show pilots that went unaired. But isn't that so weird? It's like an alternate dimension version of the show, where most of the actors remain the same, besides the dad. The first time I learned about pilots was all the way back when Wayside the movie came out on DVD, which actually wasn't a movie at all. Instead, essentially being an hour-long pilot made for the show, made years before the actual series. This special was created in 2005, while the series premiered in 2007. I was always confused why the character Mauricia had red hair in this movie and the opening, but not in the actual show. Turns out this movie was done earlier before the designs were finalized for the show. At the time, I looked it up online and learned all about pilot episodes. So thanks, Wayside, you actually taught me something. In this video, we'll be looking at various interesting pilots and pitches for some of our favorite cartoons. Some changed more than others, but they're all interesting and give a great insight into the development process of these shows. With that said, this is a look at fascinating cartoon pilots. Let's begin. The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius is one of my all-time favorite cartoons, and it has quite the history. From name changes to character design revisions, there was a lot of development behind this show. Jimmy Neutron began life in the 1980s, as just an idea in the head of show creator John A. Davis. His original vision was of a boy genius not named Jimmy Neutron, but instead Johnny Quasar. Davis originally wanted Johnny Quasar to be a live-action film, but CGI animation was later picked as the medium for the concept. It was fitting as Johnny was a super smart kid, the animation being technologically advanced was perfect. Davis's animation studio DNA Productions would be behind the animation, following their acquisition of copies of Lightwave 3D, which at the time was a very advanced CG animation program. Animation tests for the concept started being made in the early 90s, with a 40-second long animation demo called The Adventures of Johnny Quasar. This short demo was showcased publicly at SIGGRAPH in 1995, where it was met with high praise, winning several awards at the show. Remember, Toy Story was the first ever fully CG animated film, and that was released just months before Johnny Quasar was demoed. At the time, this was revolutionary. Unfortunately, for the longest time, this 40-second demo was almost completely lost. There were no copies of it available online anywhere. The only surviving clip of it was around 8 seconds long, in very low quality, and was found on an archive of DNA's website from 1997. Thankfully, the QuickTime video was archived, and this preview of the demo was preserved.
Hi, I'm Johnny Quasar, and this is my robot dog, Goddard. Bark, 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 bark.
For what seemed like forever, this was one of the only surviving clips from this point of Jimmy Neutron's development. You'd think a short praised so highly would have been preserved better, right? The only other surviving clip was found in the 1994 demo reel for the animation program Lightwave, the one DNA used to create the animation. Before I move on, this demo reel is incredible, showcasing tons of early 90s CGI animation. The primitive look of early CGI is something I'll always get a kick out of. It reminds me of those amazing commercials Pixar did before they became huge. Anyway, yeah, Johnny Quasar was lost. How did we find it? Well, your first thought might be, why not just ask DNA if they have it in their archives? Well, DNA Productions went defunct in 2006. This was actually the main reason behind Jimmy Neutron's cancellation. There was meant to be a 4th season of the show, but with the animation studio behind it going under, it never happened. That's a story for another day though. Point is, with the studio gone, it could be assumed that most of their assets were discarded too, including that demo. For a while, it was believed that these clips were the only surviving pieces of Johnny Quasar animation. People tried contacting old employees of DNA, seeing if the demo was on the disc given away at SIGGRAPH 1995, all to no avail. The short was lost, and it seemed to be gone forever. Magazine scans and these clips seemed to be all that would ever remain of Johnny Quasar and his robot dog Goddard. That was until August 14th, 2017, when miraculously, the voice actor of Johnny uploaded the demo onto YouTube, saying he saw it wasn't available online and decided to upload a VHS rip of it he had himself. And so we had the full animation demo, and it was glorious.
Hi, I'm Johnny Quasar, and this is my robot dog, Goddard.
Bark, 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 bark.
I made him myself. You see, I'm a genius, but sometimes I'm too smart for my own good.
Danger, danger.
Whoa! Got a blast!
Look at that! Gotta Blast was already his catchphrase as early as 1994. That's one of my favorite things about pilots and early concepts for these shows. You can tell the creators already have so much of the groundwork of their amazing concepts in place, it's just not all there yet. What's even more surprising though is that along with the first demo, the voice actor uploaded a second 40-second long demo of Johnny Quasar never before seen from 1997. There were these screenshots of other Johnny Quasar scenes online, but it was unknown if there was more animation done during this point of the show's production. As it turns out, there was. Those scenes though don't appear in either of the demos, including this one of Johnny and his family. This exact image would be remade years later as a piece of Jimmy Neutron stock art, though it seems like these shots exist purely as concept art. It would be great to see them in full resolution someday though. Speaking of concept art, here's some very early concept art back when he was still Johnny Quasar. On the left, we clearly see Johnny, but on the right is a design that closely resembles the Jimmy we know today. The two Johnny Quasar demos aren't the only pieces of early Jimmy Neutron animation out there, as obviously these aren't the actual pilots made for the series. Steve Odekirk, founder of O Entertainment, was impressed with the demos, and helped fund a 13-minute long pilot for Jimmy Neutron, who by 1998 had his final name and the show was really shaping up. Johnny Quasar was originally pitched to Nickelodeon all the way back in 1995, and while the network showed a lot of interest in the idea, the show wouldn't get the funding for a full episode pilot until 1997, and by then the show had become very refined. In 1998, the pilot episode of Jimmy Neutron, Runaway Rocket Boy, was completed. This pilot, in comparison to Johnny Quasar at least, closely resembles the final show. The characters look more finalized, well, most of them at least. The theme song was completed. Jimmy even has Debbie Derryberry doing his voice, just like in the final show. Jimmy is wearing a different shirt though, which funnily enough was featured on some early merchandise of the franchise. You see, merchandise is often created while a product or franchise is still being developed, which can lead to some early concepts not seen in the final product appearing on stuff like toys. Speaking of figures, here's a photo of a physical model of Johnny Quasar that was made to help create the 3D model used in the shorts. This model was on display along with a final Jimmy model at Nickelodeon's Happy Happy Joy Joy 25th Anniversary art exhibit in May of 2016. Anyway, the pilot was a success, and Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius was fully greenlit. In late 1999, after deciding a feature film would be the best way to launch the franchise, it entered production, and the rest is history. Following the immediate success and popularity of Sonic the Hedgehog in 1991, the character quickly became a multimedia icon. Sega signed tons of merchandise deals such as comics, toys, and of course, cartoons. Deke Entertainment was picked as the studio to develop these new Sonic cartoon projects, likely due to their popularity at the time and the fact that they had already proven themselves with their ever-popular Nintendo cartoons. Both The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic SatAM went through a lot of changes during their development. Let's talk about them. The shows were first shown off in a 1993 issue of Sonic the Poster Mag, a spin-off of the Fleetway Sonic the Comic series. As two separate Sonic cartoons were being developed at the same time, the issue got a few things wrong regarding which is which, but that's not too interesting. It seems Adventures of Sonic was pretty far into production by the time of this magazine's publication, because it does include screenshots from various completed episodes. For SatAM, however, that's where things get really interesting. On a page showcasing what it calls screenshots from the show, you can see a totally different incarnation of SatAM from well before the show went into full production. It's likely all of this is actually concept art, and shows a much earlier point of the show's development. Let's break it down. As different as it may look, a lot of the core ideas that make up SatAM are present, such as an early version of the Freedom Fighters, known here as the Freedom Team, as well as roboticization, known here as Dr. Robotnik's Robotic Transformation Machine. Almost every character in the Freedom Team apart from Sonic is completely different than the characters used in the final show. We've got this class man Johnny Lightfoot, Tux the Penguin, Princess Acorn, Joe Sushi, Chirps the Chicken, Porker Lewis, and Flicky. It's unknown when all of this was drawn, but the lack of tails implies all of this may have been made before Sonic 2 was even released. It does take a long time for a show to be produced, so it would make sense that production on SatAM started that early. Most of these characters are based off of Sonic's animal friends from the first game, such as Princess Acorn and Johnny Lightfoot. A few of them were used in Sonic the Comic, but most of these guys were scrapped in favor of the Freedom Fighters used in the final show. Well, apart from one. Princess Acorn is clearly an early design of Sally Acorn. In fact, other promotional artwork for this early Sonic cartoon show that Princess Acorn was still Sonic's love interest. Even Sonic himself looks different in terms of art style here. Almost everything here was changed before SatAM was finalized, though it seems his mohawk of spikes was always there. Robotnik also has a very curious design in this early promotional art, having a white mustache and a completely different outfit. All of this artwork was only ever showcased in Sonic the Poster Mag, so it's unknown how long these characters were used before Deke settled on the final designs of the show. Maybe all of this is just mock-ups, and none of it was ever intended for the actual show. The Mario cartoons also have similar promotional concept artwork not unlike those Sonic pieces, so maybe this was something Deke did for publications while their shows were still early in development. As for actual pilots, the episode of SatAM Heads or Tails is actually the show's pilot. That's why some of the characters like Sally look a little different. I've mentioned this before in my animation cells video, but the original cut of this episode features a completely different intro that was fully animated but never released publicly. This opening was scrapped and was replaced with one that's more show accurate. While on the subject of SatAM's opening, the original airings of Season 1 episodes on ABC featured a different singer singing Fastest Thing Alive.
Sonic the Hedgehog, too fast for the naked eye. Sonic the Hedgehog.
Apparently, this version of the song is sung by the composer himself, and was only ever used for original airings of Season 1. When Season 2 came around, it was replaced with a cover of the song by the band Noisy Neighbors, which is the iconic one we all love. SatAM's pilot is well known and documented, but the same cannot be said for the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog pilot. In 1992, a pilot made to pitch the show was created. The animation for this pilot was done by the team working on the show in America, and wasn't outsourced like in the final show. Because of this, the animation in the pilot is significantly better looking than in the final series. Unfortunately, this pilot is only partially available nowadays, and not in ways you'd expect. It's never been included on any home media releases of the show, but it was uploaded onto YouTube in 2009, released by Milton Knight, one of the core members of the show's team. However, the rip on YouTube is not only not in the best quality, but appears to be an incomplete version of the pilot, as it's missing music and sound effects, and has a time code in the top left corner of the screen. However, more shots of the pilot in better quality can be found in various commercials, one of which surprisingly being an advert for Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood. The end credits scene used in the final show is also animation taken from the pilot, and in episode 44, Untouchable Sonic, Scratch and Grounder watch a clip of the pilot. All of these showcase a cleaned up final version of the pilot, one we may never see. Moving on from Deke's work with Sonic, let's talk about Sonic X. Sonic X began development around 2001, and was made to springboard the Sonic franchise into unreached levels of popularity. Was it successful? That's debatable. But in 2003 when it premiered, it definitely introduced Sonic to a huge array of brand new fans. Two different pilots were made for Sonic X. The first pilot was made around 2001, and showcases a very primitive look at the show. Well, the art style and animation are actually almost identical to the final show, but everything else is very different. For one thing, this pilot was made before the show even had a name. The title card simply calls it Sonic, while the narrator, who strangely speaks in English, calls it The Sonic Adventure. The pilot describes the premise of the show as Sonic and his friends defending the universe from Dr. Eggman. And that's it. It makes no mention of Chris or any humans besides Eggman. In fact, it seems the pilot takes place entirely in Sonic's world. All of the background characters here are animals. A lot of the animation from this pilot was reused for the intro of the final show, so that's why there are certain scenes that show these animals instead of humans. Sonic X was originally going to take place entirely in Sonic's world. I guess that either wasn't interesting enough for a full show, or they changed it to be more in line with the Sonic Adventure games. The pilot also mentions that the main source of power in the show are these crystal rainbow stones, not rings, though the Chaos Emeralds are mentioned as well. Something that shows how early this pilot is that Cheese doesn't have a name yet, simply being named Chow. This is likely because it was made before the character had its final name used in Sonic Advance 2. Overall, it's a great pitch pilot for the show, showcasing the action, thrills, and spectacles seen in the final series. It even teases stuff like Shadow. Apart from a few oddities, this premise alone would make for a great Sonic show, but the series would continue to be developed after this pilot was produced. This brings us to pilot number 2, which was made later on in 2002. It's basically identical to the final show. The pilot mainly introduces the characters, including Chris and his friends, along with everything else one would need to know about the show. This pilot was shown at various promotional events for Sonic X, such as World Hobby Fair 2002 and Tokyo Game Show. Along with early promo material, this was the world's first public look at Sonic X. Unlike other pilots mentioned in this video, these two Sonic X ones aren't formatted like episodes, instead existing just to pitch the idea of the show. Despite being almost exactly the same as the final show, there was one very crucial thing seen in this pilot that was never used in the final show. But what is it? Or who is it? At the end of the pilot, a certain character you may recognize is shown.
Smart, speedy, stylish ship! Sonic!
That's right, the character made famous by fan animations, Nazo, originated from this early Sonic X pilot. Who or what this character was a complete mystery at the time. In fact, the name Nazo comes from the Japanese word for mystery. Somewhere along the way, the production team scrapped the idea of Nazo. Whatever he was going to be was never realized. Though, years later, Takashi Iizuka confirmed that Nazo wasn't going to be a new villain or anything like that, rather a new form for Sonic. Super Sonic was also in the pilot, so this would have been an additional form for the character. As he was never used in the show, fans have taken him in as their own. Chakra X's excellent Sonic Nazo Unleashed fan animation is the best example of this. A great fan film that depicts Nazo as an all-powerful villain. And when you look at this design, that's exactly what you'd think. Who knows what Nazo could have been if he was in the final show? If it was a new form for Sonic, perhaps this would have been a modern Hypersonic of sorts. Actually, maybe this is what Sonic looked like when he used the power of those crystal rainbow stones in the first pilot? Since those weren't in the final show, that could explain it. They even share a similar color to Nazo. For now, that's it for Sonic cartoons. But we haven't even mentioned the development of Sonic Boom. That's something that could fill up an entire video. I guess every piece of Sonic animation goes through a lot of changes during its development. Sonic isn't the only video game turned TV show to have a curious pilot, however, as Kirby Right Back At Ya's pilot is also pretty different. Kirby Right Back At Ya, known as Kirby of the Stars in Japan, began airing in Japan on October 6, 2001. However, an unaired pilot for the show was created a full year earlier in 2000. To promote the release of Kirby Air Ride, the Japanese magazine Famitsu had a special pack-in Kirby DVD included with the October 2003 issue. One of the things on the DVD was the Kirby of the Stars pilot. The pilot has since been ripped and has been available online for many years. This was one of the first TV show pilots I ever saw, and it has plenty differences compared to the final show. The pilot opens with Kirby asleep in space on his warp star, which then crashes down onto this planet we can assume is Popstar, like in the final show. He then meets an unnamed girl who bears resemblance to Tiff from the final series. Interestingly, despite being made in 2000, Kirby here uses design from earlier games in the series. Proto-Tiff and Kirby become fast friends, and they start having fun together, which catches the eye of King Dedede. The bulk of the pilot involves the two hanging out while Dedede attempts to ruin their fun time, always resulting in him getting hurt in comedic fashion. That is until some enemies begin to attack, such as Meta Knight. Kirby makes quick work of them, but the three are then captured by Nightmare. Kirby then wakes up, revealing the whole pilot to be nothing more than a dream, and it ends. Being just over 4 minutes long, this was almost certainly made as an animation test and nothing more. The pilot doesn't really give much in terms of info about the show, instead just showing what it could look like. It demonstrates the use of both 2D and 3D animation, which was common in the final show, and gives a good idea of the show's tone. Overall, it's a fun early look at what the show would evolve into. The development of SpongeBob Squarepants and the life of the late Steven Hillenburg are some of the greatest and most inspirational stories behind a modern-day cartoon. SpongeBob originated as this guy, named Bob the Sponge. During the late 80s, Hillenburg worked at the Orange County Marine Institute. He worked there for 3 years, and during this time created a comic titled The Intertidal Zone, as a fun way to help teach his students. The comic featured many characters based on undersea life, such as Bob the Sponge. Bob was the co-host of the comic, but is very different compared to the Bob we know now. After failing to get the comic published, Hillenburg found work at Nickelodeon, working on Rocko's Modern Life. During these early years at Nick, one of the writers on Rocko, Martin Olson, read the Intertidal Zone and told Hillenburg that he should pitch his own show, believing in his potential. Hillenburg began to expand his idea of a world about walking, talking sea life, and took Bob the Sponge and made him into a little character named Sponge Boy. Hillenburg wanted his show to stand out, and through his unique life story of being a marine biologist turned animator, came up with something only he could, a show concept named Sponge Boy Ahoy. After developing the show for long enough, Hillenburg pitched SpongeBob to Nickelodeon. It's said that Hillenburg went to the pitch meeting wearing a Hawaiian shirt and brought a fish tank full of models of characters from the show. He also played Hawaiian music throughout the pitch to really set the mood. Nickelodeon executive Eric Coleman described the setup as pretty amazing. Though no photos from this pitch exist today, it definitely sounds like one of the all-time greatest show pitches. As you can probably guess, Nickelodeon loved the idea and gave funding to produce a pilot episode of SpongeBob, which would eventually become the first episode of the series, Help Wanted. That name, SpongeBob Ahoy, stuck around for quite a while, appearing in concept art, surface storyboards for the pilot, and my personal favorite appearance, on the original painting from the end of the episode where SpongeBob is hired. It had to be edited to say SpongeBob when the name was changed. It was changed due to SpongeBob already being trademarked, so Bob the Sponge returned. I just love early SpongeBob art, and the SpongeBob era is truly something special. Production lasted through 1997, but SpongeBob wouldn't premiere until the Kids' Choice Awards in 1999, when the pilot aired following the event. Did you know that the original cut of Help Wanted had a different intro?
SpongeBob Squarepants.
This version of the episode, dubbed simply as the SpongeBob Squarepants pilot, only publicly aired once in this format on TV, during its original premiere. This original cut of the episode likely would have become completely lost, if not for VHS recordings of the original airing, as well as an official Nickelodeon home media release containing it. This, the Best of Nicktoons 1998 VHS, was given away exclusively to crew members at the studio in 1998, and it contains the SpongeBob Squarepants pilot. He's even on the cover using the same art as seen in the original title card. This VHS was made in very limited quantities and almost never shows up for sale, but if you can find one, you've got yourself a very special part of SpongeBob history. Another fun fact regarding this pilot is that on certain SpongeBob Season 1 releases, Help Wanted is missing. Now, you could assume this is because it was made before Season 1, but it's always grouped in with the rest of the season. The real reason this episode is sometimes neglected is due to the episode's inclusion of Tiny Tim's cover of the song Living in the Sunlight, Lovin' in the Moonlight. It's just because of some basic copyright issues, and to include it, they'd have to pay royalties. So they often choose not to, despite how significant it is as the first episode of the show. With that said, the episode has appeared on certain DVDs, but never as the original 1997 cut of the episode. Hopefully someday, a special SpongeBob home media release can include a high-quality version of the original cut, so we'll always have this important piece of SpongeBob history preserved in the best quality possible. One of my all-time favorite shows, and what was probably my favorite show growing up, has to be the Fairly OddParents, created by Butch Hartman. With its impressive over 15-year run, a common complaint with the Fairly OddParents now is that the show ran for way too long. The early seasons are fantastic, but after a few seasons, the show began to change. But if you're looking for more early Fairly OddParents goodness, this will pique your interest. Did you know that Season 1 actually wasn't the first time episodes were animated for the series? Season 1 premiered on March 30th, 2001, but the first ever broadcasted episode of the franchise aired on September 4th, 1998. In the late 90s, Nickelodeon Animation Studios, along with a brand new startup company Frederator Studios, created Oh Yeah Cartoons, an animated short showcase series that aired on Nickelodeon. Each episode of Oh Yeah Cartoons consisted of 3 7-minute long short episodes of what were essentially cartoon pilots. Basically, each 7-minute short served as a pilot for a potential series. Over the course of its 3-season run, the series showcased tons of great concepts for shows, including some shorts that did eventually turn into mainstay Nicktoons. Chalk Zone, My Life as a Teenage Robot, and The Fairly OddParents all got their start here on Oh Yeah Cartoons. And without Oh Yeah Cartoons, it's possible The Fairly OddParents as a concept wouldn't even exist. Way back in 1997, Butch Hartman was busy at Hanna-Barbera working on Johnny Bravo. During this time, the creator of Oh Yeah Cartoons, Fred Seiberg, proposed the idea of Butch creating his own short for the series. He originally declined the offer, but once Johnny Bravo ended, Butch needed a new job. He called up Fred asking if it was still possible for him to create a short for the new series, and with only one slot left, he needed an idea fast. And so, he quickly created the concept for what would eventually become one of Nickelodeon's most successful series of all time, on a whim. Never doubt your ideas, as basic as they are. In these early sketches, Timmy had a different color scheme and a different name. You're looking at Mikey Turner, who was named after Butch's brother, Mike Hartman. However, they got into a fight the same day Butch was designing the character, so instead he named him after his other brother, Timmy. If that's not funny enough, you can see that Timmy has a blue hat here in the original sketches. But as the story goes, while drawing the early sketches of him, Butch ran out of blue marker ink, and because of how much of a time crunch it was, quickly needed to choose a different color and chose pink. I think Timmy using pink as his main color definitely made him stand out more compared to other boy characters out there, so that was a good choice. Timmy also had red hair early on, but that was quickly changed. The show went through a few name changes as well, such as the Fairy Godparents, oh my godparents, before he landed on the Fairly OddParents, which out of those three options I think was the best choice. Wanda originally had a different name too. She was going to be named Venus, probably to go with Cosmo. However, Wanda was such a good pun, they went with that. Wanda was also going to have blue hair, but according to Butch, it was changed to pink so it didn't clash with Timmy's bedroom walls. So many strange reasons this show turned out the way it did, but all of this is so interesting. So, after coming up with one of the greatest cartoon ideas of all time in about 15 minutes, Butch originally pitched the idea to Hanna-Barbera, realizing he had something really good here, but it was rejected. So he went back to Oh Yeah Cartoons and they loved it, funding the creation of the Fairly OddParents pilot. The world was introduced to the Fairly OddParents in the 12th episode of the first season of Oh Yeah Cartoons, and it immediately became the most popular short on the show. So much so that several more Fairly OddParents shorts were created for the program. Butch even worked on other shorts for the show too, such as the Dan Danger Show shorts. A total of 10 Oh Yeah Cartoon episodes of the Fairly OddParents were made, with each becoming closer to the final show's style. After the success of these shorts, Nickelodeon ordered the first season of the Fairly OddParents, resulting in 13 episodes that aired throughout 2001 and were an overwhelming success for the network. It's amazing that such a popular show originated from something so small. I don't know what it is, whether it be a funny moment or a full episode, I will never get tired of Family Guy. The development of Family Guy can be traced back to creator Seth MacFarlane's student film, The Life of Larry, which he created while studying at the Rhode Island School of Design in 1994 and 1995. The short centers on Larry Cummings, along with his talking pet dog, Steve, clear early versions of Peter and Brian respectively. They even use the same voices that they do in the final show, both being voiced by Seth himself. Larry also has a wife named Lois, who's an obvious comparison despite having a completely different design, as well as a son named Milt who would later become Chris. No signs of Meg or Stewie yet, but the Family Guy seeds were clearly in place. The short has much of the same comedic styling that would be used in Family Guy, even including some jokes that would be reused throughout the first season of the show. Along with animated segments, Seth appears in live-action clips that introduce the world of the short, as well as pitch the show in general. While The Life of Larry wouldn't be made into a full show as is, Seth had another chance to show his potential in 1997. The head of Hanna-Barbera at the time, Ellen Cockrell, saw The Life of Larry and gave Seth the opportunity to create his own short for their animation showcase series, What a Cartoon. This series is very similar in concept to Oh Yeah Cartoons, and just like that did, it paved the way for many Cartoon Network classics. It's the program that housed and funded pilots for shows like the Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo, and more. In 1997, Larry and Steve aired and showed a more refined version of the original cartoon. Interestingly, as What a Cartoon aired on Cartoon Network, this take on the series is geared towards a much younger demographic than the original or Family Guy, never reaching the adult jokes of those. I think the reason these two shorts are so fascinating to me is that they're so different from what Family Guy would become, yet you can see how this became that. There are a lot of weird parallels. For instance, Larry briefly mentions a furniture store named Stewie's. There's a Star Wars gag, and there's a short appearance by an airline pilot character whose look and voice is very similar to that of Glenn Quagmire's, who in the final show is also a pilot. It's pretty amazing to watch these early shorts as fans of the series, catching all of the inspirations that would lead to the final show. These are such a great look at how a show concept develops over time. It's inspiring, really. Once again, Larry and Steve was never picked up to become a full series. After creating the short, Seth would continue to work at Hanna-Barbera on positions such as staff writer on Johnny Bravo, but his cartoon for Cartoon Network would never come to be. During the time after Larry and Steve, but before Family Guy, Seth MacFarlane and Butch Hartman actually collaborated on a third short, known as Zoomates, made for Oh Yeah Cartoons. This one isn't related to Family Guy at all, but is still an interesting footnote. I know a lot of people say this short is annoying, but I don't know, I think it's so dumb it's hilarious. Regardless of the quality of the short, I think it's really cool that the creators of both Family Guy and the Fairly OddParents worked on something together. Anyway, sometime after the creation of Larry and Steve, executives at Fox saw the shorts and were impressed. Seeing potential in the concept, especially the original short, Fox approached Seth with the idea of a full series, and after he accepted, they gave him just $50,000 to create a 15-minute long pilot for for a full TV show, which by then had evolved into Family Guy. After half a year of non-stop work, the pilot was finished, and unlike the Larry shorts, closely resembles what we know today. This is the Family Guy pilot. The entire family is now together, and even most of the supporting cast make appearances too. There are some slight differences in character design, such as Lois having bright blonde hair. In fact, almost all of the characters look the same, they're just using different colors. Now this is the definition of a pilot. The general show is there, but with slightly cheaper looking animation, designs that aren't quite final, and an overall lack of polish. But hey, for $50,000, not a bad effort, and clearly the people at Fox liked what they saw. But here's the thing, Seth created a 15-minute long pilot for the show. However, this pilot is not the same as the first episode of the series, Death Has a Shadow. While it shares many of the same jokes and plot points, Death Has a Shadow is like a touched-up, finalized version of the original pilot, and it was created after the full show was picked up. Death Has a Shadow and Family Guy as a whole premiered following Super Bowl 33 on January 31st, 1999, but the original pilot has never aired on TV, and only 7 minutes of it are available online, thanks to a preview of it that was archived. The rest of the pilot is a truly tragic case of lost media, only existing at the moment through low-res screenshots, as well as a few clips that were used in promotional material. This is not okay. Sure, the rest of the pilot is probably just scenes that were reused for later episodes, but come on, how is it that the pilot of one of the biggest cartoons ever is lost? This is like if half of Help Wanted was just not available. Hopefully someday, Fox releases the rest of the pilot, maybe in a special anniversary collection or something. This means that the 2011 episode Back to the Pilot isn't exactly truthful. They go back to Death Has a Shadow, not the pilot. This was probably because the pilot never aired officially and everything looks different in it, but Brian and Stewie technically don't go back to the pilot. Family Guy is far from the only show with a lost pilot. In fact, we're pretty lucky that we have any of it. Before we wrap up here, let's take a look at some pilots that are completely lost. Most TV show pilots are made solely to prove to the producers and networks that a show can work, be entertaining, and deserves their funding. Pilots are mainly meant to only be watched by network executives and those working on the show. It's actually pretty rare for a pilot to be aired publicly on TV, given how rough they are and how they don't represent the product the network wants to sell. Generally, they go unaired once the network picks up the show and orders a full season. Because of this, many TV show pilots have become lost media over the years. Lost media is any media you can't access in full, and there are plenty of pilots that can be classified as this. Johnny Quasar, as we mentioned earlier, went unseen for over 20 years. Those shorts weren't meant for public viewing outside of events, and were kept under wraps for many years. I'm so glad the voice actor eventually uploaded them. For the elite class of humans known as Hi Hi Puffy Amayumi fans, you'll be pleased to hear that show's pilot, which was lost for years, has been found. The Gravity Falls pilot, which is essentially an earlier version of the first episode, was lost for many years, until it was released when the wide-scale Cypher Hunt ARG was completed. The pilot episode for Dora the Explorer is only partially found, but gives a good look at some early character designs. The list goes on and on. The Johnny Test pilot features early takes on the characters and that's gone. There are several lost pitch pilots for various early incarnations of Thomas the Tank Engine. Winx Club has an early test pilot called Magic Bloom that was made years before the series was put into full production, and there are many more. When one of these lost pilots is found though, it's the best thing ever. Fans of these often long cancelled shows now have a new piece of media they can enjoy. The pilots for the beloved show Kappa Mikey were lost for many years, only recently surfacing. This show, eventually made for Nickelodeon, was originally pitched to MTV with an adult-themed pilot. It, was rejected. A second, completely unrelated pilot made for Nicktoons was eventually found as well. These two are very interesting examples of pilots, and they were lost. Obviously, you can't imagine all of these pilots will be released, but it's surprising how many popular shows have pilot episodes that just aren't available. Johnny Bravo started as a 1993 student film called Meso Blues, which features a very different but still recognizable version of the show. It's never been released. Lost pilots of shows that were unproduced are even worse. There's an existing animatic for a pilot of a Kingdom Hearts cartoon that has never been released, and likely never will. Thankfully though, as efforts to uncover lost media become more and more popular, more of these are popping up all the time. If interest is shown and there isn't too much legal limbo holding them back, I'm sure these creators love to share their work. Hopefully more of these lost pilots will surface in the future. We'll get that full Family Guy pilot someday. And there you have it, a look at some of the most fascinating and inspiring cartoon pilots of all time. Many of these might just be rough versions of the shows they'd evolve into, but I love them. I think I like these pilots so much because as they're primitive versions of the shows they become, they're pretty inspirational. For example, while not a pilot for the show itself, take a look at the student films by J.G. Quintel, the creator of Regular Show. During his time at CalArts, he made 2 student films, The Naive Man from Lollyland and 2 in the AM/PM. Made with nothing but pencils, paper, and a small budget, Quintel made short films that led to one of the biggest shows of the 2010s. Most of these pilots were made years before the full shows were put into production. Most of the cartoons we love today went through so many changes before getting greenlit. If you have a dream to make a show someday, never give up. It may seem impossible to get a show on the air, but all of these creators, all of these shows, started in the exact same place you might be in right now. Keep on creating, keep on forming your ideas. No matter how strange or dumb they may seem to others, if you believe in your concept and know there's potential in it, one day you'll be able to realize it. It may take 5 years, it may take 10, but if you keep trying and working hard, you can do anything, just like these creators did before. What if in the 80s, John A. Davis forgot about Johnny Quasar? We would have never gotten the film, the series, Planet Sheen. Okay, what I'm saying is he worked on the show concept for decades, and now we have this wonderful show that has inspired countless people. Your show, your concept, your pitch could be the next big thing. Keep on working towards that dream, and one day, you'll succeed. Let these pilots be inspiration for the cartoons of tomorrow. Thank you to all of the incredible creators who have produced all of this content over the years. Hopefully this video brings more attention to these awesome pilots, and gives more insight into just how much work goes into making these amazing shows what they are today.